So, 3 practical takeaways. I'm going to get really real here as we draw in our conclusion, okay? 3 practical considerations to take away in light of the command. If Paul really meant, raise up your children in the Paideia of God. 3 quick takeaways for what that means. And I'm going to go in increasingly hard pills to swallow from least to greatest, okay? Number 1. First, parents, this absolutely destroys the concept that the only Christian education your child needs is at church 2 or 3 hours a week. Destroys it. Listen, we will do, on behalf of Kirby Woods, we will do our absolute best. We will do the best we can. And furthermore, I will tell you, we are going to invest in our children over the next 2 years in big ways. But even with all of that, we just don't have access to your kids for enough raw hours to do the kind of damage that we need to do in a way that would actually change their hearts and lives. It's a brief exposure that we get with our kids. The bulk of the weight of the hours of their life is going to fall to you, parents. I think that Moses wrote on this concept. I think Moses and God had this concept of Paideia before the Greeks ever said it. I can show you from Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. It'll be on the screen. I'll read it for you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. That's the summation of the old covenant. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your who? Children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your what? House, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise. That's a whole day, by the way. And you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorpost of your what? House and on your gates. We must recover the view that parents are teachers. And the home is a place where training takes place. I tell you, I saw a clip from Adrian Rogers this week, and he said this: "We complained that the 10 Commandments are removed from the schoolhouse and other places, but how many of us parents responded by putting the 10 Commandments up in our home? Furthermore, how many parents even know the 10 Commandments?" I thought that was a powerful statement. It exposes the common view that it is everybody else's responsibility to train up our child but us. And that is not true. That's first. Second, the second practical takeaway from raising your children in the Paideia of God. It is hard to read the definition of the phrase Paideia of God and come to a real world application that looks like our current public school system. I understand every teacher, every school, every district, every administrator, every state is different. I understand that. There are great and wonderful godly teachers fighting the good fight for our kids. Some of you here in the room are doing that. Praise God for you. I was raised in public school myself. But listen, things today are not what they were 5 years ago. There has been a massive change for the worse. And my point is that if you look into this concept of Paideia as Greeks saw it, and then Paul commands us, take that, subvert it, Christianize it, and combine it with Deuteronomy 6, it is hard to say that handing our children over to the secular government for their education for 13 years plus 4 more of radical anti-God college is obeying Ephesians 6:4. We need to be asking the question, just ask the question, can I say before the Lord, I am raising up my children in the Paideia of God in that system? If the answer is yes, God bless you. Go and be blessed and be on your way. But if the answer is no, don't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. That's number 2. Thirdly, for our practical applications in the real world, if we are to raise up our kids in the Paideia of God, and every definition of Paideia you can find seems to indicate, and everyone I read said this, that it refers to the culture our children are raised in and around. Christians, we can no longer say that it is not our responsibility to fight the culture wars. The Greeks did not view Paideia strictly as in the home or in the classroom, but every part of the culture that affected their child. A Christian that says, I don't care about the culture I live in, is like a fish saying, I don't care about the water I swim in or that passes over my gills. Unless you are Amish, you are a part of this culture, and it affects you every single day. So think of your formative years from age 8 to 18, for example. Think of the generation you lived in, what was happening in the world from 8 to 18. Even if you were a Christian, I'm betting on some level you were affected by the popular movies of the time. You know the catchphrases of your generation. You know the hits of the top 40. You know and remember where you were when the big news story broke. What was it, JFK? Was it the Challenger? Was it 9/11? We all have those. They're a part of our minds. You follow the sports team of your time. You see the art that the world said was beautiful. You walked past statues where you looked up at someone that venerated that person for something they had done. When a national anthem plays at a baseball game, what do? You stand up, you take your hat off, and you cross your heart. Who told you to do that? It's part of the culture. It's just part of the culture. No one even has to say to do it. You see architecture of the buildings that you're in, and it affects the way you think about life. There's color palettes that are unique to the time in which you lived, hairstyles unique to the time in which you lived, graphic design and fonts and colors. Things happen. You watch the Super Bowl and you expect to laugh at some commercials. Why? It's part of the culture. One way or another, it forms your mind as to what is good and acceptable among your people and among your culture. Your culture will affect what you believe is true, good, and beautiful. We have a culture. Here in America, we have one. Just like China has a culture, just like Brazil has a culture, just like Kenya has a culture, just like France has a culture. And those cultures can be formed in light of Christian influence, or they can run counter to Christian influence and be actively hostile to Christ. But the thing that I want for your consideration, parents, if I am to raise up my children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, in the Paideia of God, why would I spend so much time feeding them scriptures and training them in righteousness and then have no concern as to what their eyeballs see as we trot them through Target past the big pride display in the front? Why would I devote my life to raising healthy girls and boys and then have no concern of the cultural air in which they breathe, that it might be polluted with dirty smog and poison gas? So Christians, I believe that our culture is what it is because we have largely retreated from it. The darkness loves when the light retreats. And I believe that there is a time and a way to engage in what has been called culture wars, not for political point scoring, but to clean up the air that our children breathe as they live their lives, and to glorify God in all things, including our shared culture. He is Lord, not just of your little heart and of this church, but He is Lord of all things, even that which we have written off as secular, because He is Lord of all.